And good morning, my beautiful America. Welcome back to the All American Book Club. Ladies and gentlemen, we are in the month of May, Military Appreciation Month, with very special guests. This morning, we have the honor to bring over to the show for the very first time, Kim Casey Campbell, United States Air Force. And, Casey, just for you guys, FYI, it means killer chick. And I about died laughing when I heard the story behind it. So you guys are going to get to hear a very powerful story. And her book really is a personal aspect to me, a love letter to aviation. She's a keynote speaker, best-selling author, leader, fighter pilot, and her book is Flying in the Face of Fear, a fighter pilot's lessons on leading with courage. And you guys, get out of the way. She has served more than 24 years in the United States Air Force, flown more than 1,800 hours in the A-10 Warthog, and I tell you what, 100 in combat missions, protecting our troops in both Iraq and Afghanistan. Okay, you guys, help me welcome to the show, Kim Casey Campbell. I'm so glad to have you here, killer chick. Oh my gosh, that was
Thanks.
hysterical.
Thanks so much for having me.
Absolutely. So I love your story. I feel like we're not too far apart in age, because when you were talking about certain parts of you joining your love of aviation, that whole time period. So just share with us briefly your love letter to aviation and just falling in love with it and how you really strived to get into the Air Force Academy.
Yeah, it all started in 1986, which is not Top Gun. I know many people are familiar that
Yeah,
that was
yeah.
the time frame, but it was actually the launch of the Space Shuttle Challenger. And I know that sounds a little crazy. It still sounds a little crazy to me, but I think watching it, there was this thrill and excitement with flight, and then watching the tragedy play out in front of me. I think there was just something in that moment that connected with me, this idea that these astronauts died doing
Mhm.
something that they believed in, something that was bigger and more important than themselves. And so at 10 years old, I decided that's what I want to do. I want to be an astronaut. It's a pretty large path to get there. And so my parents kindly, talked to me about it. And my dad had been in the Air Force and said, well, if you want to be an astronaut, you might consider being a pilot. And if you want to be a pilot, many of those pilots come out of the Air Force Academy, with no idea that his little girl would actually go through with it.
Yeah, well, I love how your dad realized you were serious at a certain point and that he
Yeah.
started helping you prepare for that. What was that like?
Yeah, I think after I kind of stuck with this goal for a while, he was like, "Oh, she is serious." And so he said, "Well, if you're going to go to the Air Force Academy, you're going to go in prepared and ready." And so he really became my partner in all of it. We would
Yeah.
run the hills in San Jose where I grew up in combat boots. And I had done track and cross country, but didn't have a lot of upper body strength. And so he installed a pull up bar in the bathroom. So
Yeah.
every time I went in and out, I'd do pull ups. And, it made a huge difference, because when I finally got to the Air Force Academy, I could max the fitness test, which, that just was one thing that easily kind of set me aside in terms of I wasn't the one getting yelled at for physical fitness. Let's put it that way.
Yeah. Well, I mean, let's also say the audience at this point, because we're talking to veterans, we're talking to active duty, but we're also talking to young Hill staffers who are in the DMV area. Remind them that this time in history, women at the academies was kind of unusual and even to a point. So
Yeah.
share that.
Yeah, I mean, well, first off, in 1986, this whole dream of mine of becoming a pilot, I didn't want to be just any pilot. I wanted to be a fighter pilot.
Yeah.
Women weren't allowed to be fighter pilots. And so, my parents never told me that. They never said, well, you can't do that. They just kind of said, all right, if that's your goal, you need to work hard and go after it.
Yeah.
At the time that I was at the Air Force Academy, I think we were like 12% women. Don't quote
Hmm.
me on that, but still small numbers. And so for me, I knew that I needed to be prepared. I knew I needed to work hard, but that was it. Like for me, I was just like, well, I'll just go in and go in as ready as I can and do the best that I can. And I don't know, I didn't really put much of it wasn't a big deal to me at the
Yeah.
time. It was just like, well, this is what I want to do. So I'm going to go do it.
Well, one thing that really stands out to me in your book, and it's applicable for those who are thinking about joining the service. It's for those who are active duty. I'm going to say really quickly, you were active duty, military spouse, military mom, and the daughter of military. I mean, the whole military component, it is a selfless service to this nation. But you carry that with you as you went to Iraq. And I want to talk about everything that I see as God preparing you, leading you up to that moment, and what you had to go through in that time and period. So, for those who haven't read the book yet, here's a little snapshot of what you went through on that day. So, I'd love for you to share that.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, April 7th, 2003 for me deploying to Iraq was definitely a pivotal time in my life, definitely a pivotal moment. Um, like you said, I feel like everything that I had done in my life, all of the rejections, the failures, the mistakes, everything that the hard things that had happened along the way, I think really prepared me for this one moment. I can say it now because I've had 20 years to reflect on it.
Yeah.
But I think you never know when that moment will come for you. And for me, this was my second deployment. We had deployed to Afghanistan in 2002, Iraq in 2003. And that for me was probably the hardest thing I've ever done. I never thought that we would be doing close air support, which is our support to the ground troops
Mhm.
over Baghdad inside what we called at the time the super MES, which is the super missile engagement zone. But the
Mhm.
reality was the ground troops were there. They wanted us to be there. And, we were going to be there and do everything we could to help them out. And on April 7th, 2003, we were doing just that. Unfortunately, the weather that day wasn't great. And so we
Yeah.
were just hanging out overhead. We couldn't see Baghdad below, but we knew obviously the ground troops were out there doing what they do. And we got a call that our troops were taking fire. They needed immediate assistance, and we were going to do everything we could to go help them out.
Yeah. So talk about what happened to your plane. Talk about what you had to go through, and then we'll jump to you taking those lessons and what you do now,
Yeah.
for the entrepreneurs, the business leaders, et cetera.
Yeah. Well, when the guys on the ground need us, we're going to do everything we can. And so we
Yeah.
found a hole in the clouds. We got down below the weather and we could instantly see this firefight, bright flashes, smoke,
Mhm.
tracers, very surreal for kind of that half second. And then you're like, now
Yeah.
it's time to get to work.
Yeah.
We did everything we could, use guns and rockets on the enemy location. And then because at the same time we could see this firefight happening on the ground, we were also seeing like puffs of gray and white smoke, bright flashes in the air. Now they're shooting at us too. So we knew we had to kind of get in there quickly and then get out. And as I was coming off my last rocket pass is when I just felt and heard this loud explosion at the back of the airplane. And I knew immediately I had been hit. I mean, the jet nosed over, pointed down at Baghdad below. My initial reaction was just pulling back on the control stick, and
Right.
absolutely nothing happened. And so it's kind of that moment of like, there's nobody else in the airplane. All that training, all that preparation is coming down to these essentially seconds in the air where I need to make a decision about how to get the airplane under control. I remember looking down at the ejection handles thinking there's no way that's,
Yeah.
I don't want to do that.
Yeah.
And quickly went through the analysis of what was happening, realized I had no hydraulics on the airplane. And my only chance at this point was our backup emergency system. And thankfully flipped the switch and it worked exactly as advertised. And the jet started to climb up and away from Baghdad. And that was kind of like, okay, take a deep breath. I think I might make it out of here alive now.
Yeah, but you do so well in describing it. Obviously, you were living through the moment and putting it to words in your book and talking about just you had been made for that moment, really.
Yeah.
And how, okay, let's get you out of enemy territory into a safe zone so you could easily get the plane taken care of, take care of yourself, and knowing that you had to check in with your team, letting them know you were okay. That whole scenario, have you been able to share that scenario with other active duty fighter pilots, those who are just starting out? Because like you and I just talked about, Seymour Johnson's in our backyard and we see all these. I even sat with a young pilot on Sunday for Easter Mass and brand new. And I'm sitting there saying, "Sister, I pray for you all the time. You don't know that, but I just there's so much that they go through."
Yeah. Yeah, that was one of the things that was really important for me after this mission, after the deployment, kind of coming home and reflecting and,
Yeah.
unpacking everything was really to pull those lessons learned. And when I was flying home from Baghdad, it was an hour, trying to decide at this point if I'm still going to try to land this airplane or just get to friendly territory and eject. And There are a lot of thoughts coming into my mind, a lot of prayers happening, a lot of thoughts about my life and what I wanted to accomplish, but also thoughts of the pilots who had come before me. The pilots who had shared their stories with me about how they survived during Desert Storm, the things they went through, the mistakes they made, and the lessons they learned. And so I felt like it was really important for me to do the same, almost
Mhm.
like a calling, a
Yeah.
responsibility for me to share that lesson. And so it was really important. Obviously have talked to many A-10 pilots and shared
Yeah.
a lot of those lessons, changed some of the training that we do to share kind of my decision-making process and all the things that were happening in the cockpit. And then for me, it's more of a personal passion of sharing that message with young people, whether it's girls in aviation, the Air Force Academy. We live right outside the gate
Yeah.
in Colorado, and I love that opportunity to share those lessons learned, just like all the people along the way that helped me on my journey as well.
What are some of the messages that I studied a lot of your speeches, so I see what you bring to the table. And, with the work, whether it's Capitol Hill, whether it's the White House, whether it's a CEO, an entrepreneur, or a young professional starting out, what are some of the top bullet points that you share with your audiences, to kind of give them that anchor?
Yeah. That's the interesting thing is obviously these lessons apply to these new, young
Yeah.
aviators and
Yeah.
young leaders, emerging leaders, but I also find that they are also very applicable to experienced leaders who might just need to hear it from a different perspective.
Yeah.
For instance, obviously being able to prioritize under pressure and make decisions in these complex, dynamic, uncertain environments that we all find ourselves in. It's having courage in the face of fear to do hard things, to make tough decisions. I mean, sometimes people think courage is like this huge, massive thing, but the reality is it's the small, brave moves that we do every day when we
Yeah.
make those tough decisions, have the hard conversations. And I think probably one of the biggest things to me, and, I look back and how I survived that moment was the wingmen, the people by your side, the people who are going to be with you through the thick and the thin, the good and the bad, the ups and the downs, who will give you the honest feedback. Having that wingman, having that mutual support, creating that culture on your team, a wingman culture where we push
Yes.
each other. It is support, it is encouragement, but we're also pushing each other. We're challenging each other to be at our best. To
Mhm.
me, those are some of the absolute key things that came out of that mission. I mean, yes, it was a terrifying moment in my life. It was life defining, life changing, but I feel like it was a blessing in many ways because
Yeah.
it taught me so much about myself. It happened so early in my career. It really set the path for the rest of my life as a mom, as a
Yeah.
spouse, as a leader, and as a fighter pilot.
Well, I mean, we always talk about resilience, the resilience of the military spouse, the resilience of the military family, the resilience that comes from our military because of the hurry up and wait mentality. I mean, my husband had me out in the rain the other day. If it ain't raining, you ain't training. I'm like, is that really a US Army quote? And I looked it up. I'm like, sure enough, it is. But it's that whole mentality that is taught. And it's that selfless service to the nation, but it's also you are rising up this next generation and you are instilling in that next generation, knowing that you have two boys. What has it been like for them? I mean, I know that you are now retired, your husband's also retired, but what has it been for you to see the world through their eyes? Um, what is that? How has that been for them? They're like, "Oh, my mom and dad, they did this, they did that." But do they get it? Because I noticed a lot of our military kids, they either love it or they go the opposite direction. But I love to see most of the time they don't. They love it.
Yeah. It's funny. I think my kids they're my two boys, they're 12 and 16. And I think growing up, it was just kind of like what we did. I mean, they were so
Yeah.
little for so much of the time. And so it was just like, oh, well, that's just what mom and dad do. They never really
Right.
thought it was interesting or cool. I remember at one point, my son, as he got a little bit older, my oldest, he's like, Mom, I Googled you. And I was like, what? And he's like, yeah, I Googled you. There was like this stuff in Iraq. And I was like, oh, I guess we need to have the
Oh,
conversation.
yeah.
They weren't alive when that happened. And so, like, how
Yeah.
do you have those conversations with your kids? And so, I think there was some of the reality that set in. I recently brought my youngest son to one of my speeches, and I think, he kind of knew some things, but when he watched my speech and heard the story, and it was a veterans group and, very safe space for him to be in, at the end of the speech, he bolted from the back of the room and came up to give me the biggest hug in front of everybody. And I think it was like that one moment of like, he gets it. He really gets it, you know, why I do this, why I continue to do this. But the reality is they're teenage boys and they still like, we're just mom and dad. And
yeah, no, absolutely. No, that's a very good point, because for your son to Google you, I mean, you were on CBS Evening News, you were on all the major news stations when that happened. So I could see why they'd be like, oh my gosh, this is my mom. She actually did this. But you have set a tone, you have set a journey for the future female combat pilots and our fighter pilots and what is ahead for them. We have about 3.5 minutes left. In the final 3.5 minutes, what do you what are you doing now? And as you are in this new season of your life, do you find this new generation, are they reaching out to you, or are you almost a mentor for them?
yeah, you know, I got to spend my final year in the Air Force, 24 years, and spent the last year as the director at the Center for Character and Leadership Development at the Air Force Academy. What an incredible opportunity for life to come full circle and to get, you know, this really great opportunity to mentor the next generation of our leaders. And so that has been really powerful for me. And I found purpose and passion in that, which was really hard after I retired, to find that, you know, find that drive, that passion that I had while serving. But for me, it is about how can we help others on their journey? How can we help them grow and improve and learn? And so I've taken that with me in this next chapter by writing the book, getting on stages, sharing the messages just to help others on their journey to try to make a difference in their lives.
Where do you have any speaking engagements coming up in the next for the rest of the year where my audience can either come hear you speak, or where can we get you to come speak? How does that work? Because I know we have so many people come to the show and they're like, okay, we've got to get them. We've got to do this. We got to do that. And that's also me behind the scenes saying, we got to get KC over here. We have to do this. So how has that been for you? And what do you have coming up?
Yeah, that's great. Most of my speeches are with private businesses and corporations, but there are a few public speeches. I was recently at the Cradle of Aviation Museum doing a keynote there and a book signing. So there are opportunities. The best way to get in touch with me, the best way to follow the schedule is through my website, which is kim-kc-campbell.com. And that way you can see the schedule. You can reach out. I think it's important. I love connecting with readers, with listeners, because we clearly have such a short time and we don't cover everything. So I love the opportunity to connect with people. That's been one of the greatest things about this next chapter of my life, is really making connections and helping others.
No, I absolutely love that, Kim. Thank you. I'm looking forward to sharing your book with our audience here at the All American Book Club. And, you know, we are going to be, just so you know, you're on the military appreciation list, but you're also going to be on the summer read list. And so
Awesome.
that's going to, yeah, absolutely. So, but we're going to find many other opportunities for you, I have no doubt. Thank you so much for your service. Thank you so much for your family service. And people always say, okay, Eden, you don't have to say that every time, but I'm like, no, that's coming straight from the heart. That's not me just saying those words, because I live around it daily, whether it's being the veteran spouse or being around the active duty, making sure that we're looking out for our military, their families, their spouses. It's just so important.
It is so important. And I see it with my kids. You know, they sacrificed quite a bit while my husband and I were serving. They were a big part of our lives. They're also a big part of the reason we chose this next chapter of our life. But it is so important to support our military, to support our veterans, to continue to make a difference, because that service is tremendous. And it's so nice to hear that we have the support from our fellow, American people who, say thank you for your service. It's much appreciated, because it hasn't always happened in our past.
Absolutely. Vietnam. Exactly. Right. Exactly. Well, I see it here more than ever before. And the work that I do, the show, the hunger, the patriotism, it's there. And I'm so excited to see how it unfolds. So anyway, I am so thankful for Kim KC Campbell, for all those who are watching on the YouTube channel. I think we should just make your website killerchick.com. I think it'll just be anyway, I love your book, Flying in the Face of Fear. Many blessings to you. Thank you so much, Kim.
Thank you for having me. I appreciate it.
And for all those who are tuning in, stay tuned for our next segment.